Oh, sorry about this. I hit the go button before I turned the microphone on. My bad. All right, good morning. Happy New Year. I see Uncle Steve's got first blood this morning. Before I turned the microphone on. My bad. All right, good to see you. We're back in the new year. It is election. It's an election year, election season. Let the games begin. And we're going to start with election year. Many of you may have noticed that I reused the thumbnail from last week, but the Epstein client list is trending, and we're going to talk about that a bit. The thumbnail from last week, but the Epstein client list is trending, and we're going to talk about that a bit. The thumbnail from last week, but the Epstein client list is trending, and we're going to talk about that a bit. Okay, sorry about the echo there. I forgot to mute the Rumble side before I got started, and it was so Rumble was playing audio through the. Anyway, good morning, everybody. So I said we'll see what happens, and we saw what happened. And what happened was I took most of the week off last week. And it's funny, two things could be true at the same time. I took a little extra time. I spent some of that when I wasn't doing the show. I still worked last week. I still went out and, did real estate photography, videography, and worked on editing a video project for a client set. Still worked, but I took the week off mostly from the show. And in part because, that week right after Christmas, it's just a slow news week. There's not much to cover. And I mean, it is what it is. Yesterday, I figured most of you guys might sleep in, and I still had a little work I wanted to do with that time. And we went down to the farm and saw Ma and Granddad and had collard greens and black-eyed peas because, y'all, there are few things in this world that I find more important than starting the new year out with a clean colon. I like my collard greens. I don't fuck around about collard greens on New Year's, y'all. So that's part of what's up. And then let me see if I can get, for some reason I'm not seeing the chat over on Rumble. Let me see if I can get that fixed so I can see who's over there. And okay, I see Uncle Steve and Sergeant Major. There's a bunch of people watching, but only those two have commented over there. And over here on YouTube and Facebook, I see Uncle Steve pulling double duty. I already mentioned that he had first blood on the YouTubes. Fish and Golf is with us. Mr. C, good morning. GCM joins us. FTP, baby, good morning. Good morning. Pitt, Danny. And I see Ma and Megan have joined us. And Anarchy, good to see you again. And last but not least, Jeff and his dog chop wood and play video games. I have a deep appreciation for the humor of Jeff's name. Oh, and Trish is with us. Good morning. Oh, good morning. So, Happy New Year, everybody. And y'all, it's 2024. It's not just a new year, it's an election year. And as many of you know, one of my very favorite full contact sports is politics. It's not just an election year, it's going to be a crazy election year. And there's a lot to talk about, not least of which is the question of whether or not we have an election this year. And frankly, I'm prepared to say now that there will not be an election this year. Now, let me give that some caveats. And we're going to talk about this more and more in the coming days and weeks. This morning, we're going to be talking about the Epstein client list more. I'm going to dig into that because this morning on X and Twitter, the trending thing is the Epstein client list. And that in itself might be enough for me to do a show, but in particular this morning, not only is that trending, but alongside the Epstein client list is trending the phrase MAGA, Ted Cruz, Bill Clinton, Mar-a-Lago, and they're all trending because of the trending of the Epstein client list. Mar-a-Lago is all the hashtag stuff there, all the commentary there is about the apparent association between Trump and Epstein, where if anybody's been paying attention, the real story there is Epstein showed up at Mar-a-Lago for a party one time and Trump kicked him out. Ted Cruz is trending alongside this because he's on the short list for Donald Trump for the Supreme Court nomination. And Cruz himself has quite recently made comments about the need to release the Epstein client list. The MAGA thing, obviously, many of us that support the president, President Trump, that is, we want to see that client list. The MAGA world wants to see that Epstein client list. And I'm going to dig into that a little more in just a minute. But let me preface tomorrow's show real quick. I'm going to talk about the several states that have moved to remove President Trump from the ballot. And so, like I just said a minute ago, I am already prepared to say with confidence that there will not be an election this year. And here's what I mean by that. There will, in fact, be all of the trappings and rigmarole and hullabaloo, all of the appearance of an election. You will likely go and cast a ballot. But it is the case that it will not be a legitimate election, no matter what the outcome is. Even if Donald Trump wins the election, it will not have been a legitimate election, and here's why. Because several states have moved under their own presupposed and overreaching authority to remove Donald Trump from the ballot, what has happened is even if the Supreme Court, and I suspect that they will, I actually have a high degree of confidence that the Supreme Court will come in and overturn these decisions. Donald Trump will be on the ballot in all 50 states. But I want to refer you back to the rental crisis of the pandemic. When Joe Biden said, right, and we can go back to Thurgood Marshall, we'll do what we want to do and let the law catch up. Joe Biden said, I'm extending the moratorium on rent, which was processed through the CDC, where it was a moratorium on evictions. And they said, you won't be thrown out of your home if you can't make your rent during the pandemic. And that sounds lovely on paper. It sounds very nice. But if you don't pay your rent, the landlord can't pay his bills. Right? Harm is being caused. When you do not fulfill your responsibilities and obligations, you are causing harm. But what I really want you to pay attention to is Biden's maneuver there. He said, I am extending the moratorium on evictions. And I know that I do not have the authority to do that. I know that what I'm doing by, as the president, extending the moratorium on evictions, that I am not just exceeding my authority, but committing a crime, and the courts will catch up, and the court will overturn that. the court's going to shut that shit down. The Supreme Court, at a minimum, is going to say the president does not have the authority to do this, but we're going to do it anyway so that we can buy that time. Because the court takes time to catch up. So, in the case of Colorado and in the case of the state of Maine removing Donald Trump from the ballot, in both of these cases, the decision is stayed by the decision makers until the 4th of January or until the Supreme Court issues guidance and ruling on the subject. And they did that because they know they can't actually do the thing that they're doing in removing Trump, right? There's a few other states who have at least floated the idea, and that's still going on. But they know damn well that it is not within their authority to do the thing that they're doing, and they're counting on the damage that they intend to cause having its effect before the court and the law can catch up to them and shut it off. They're counting on using the lag time of the court not catching up to have the desired effect. And part of that desired effect is creating the narrative that Donald Trump committed an insurrection. So they've done two things here. They've abolished the legal principle of innocent until proven guilty, which has been an active aim, an active objective of the left and the Democrat Party for years, right? Take the case of George Floyd, the case of Kyle Rittenhouse, the case of the McMichaels. The abolition of justice is not a symptom of a greater problem. It is the objective of the radical left. They seek to abolish the process of justice and create a system in which what passes for justice as it's described within the context of law is the ability to target political enemies for harassment, prosecution, and persecution, and destruction. And they're working in that direction. I fully expect that the decisions out of Colorado and Maine, et cetera, are going to be shut down by the Supreme Court. And then, after the primary's over, after Donald Trump is the obvious nominee, has clearly won the primary, and we're into the general election proper, as we get closer and closer to the date of the general election, one or more states will remove Donald Trump from the ballot, from the general ballot. The Supreme Court will step in and say you can't do that, and it will already be too late. His name will have been removed from the ballot. And even if it's not, they will have decreed, as they have by having taken these steps now, that there are no elections because a handful of radical activists who are in positions of political and government authority have exerted that they have the authority to, at a minimum, temporarily choose who is even available for you to vote for. They will abolish the primary system by which parties choose candidates, that abolition only affects Republicans. As we've seen very clearly, you take a look at how Bernie Sanders was treated. As we've seen very clearly, the Democrat Party does not have a primary process. What they have is a roster that goes in order, and they throw out enough people during a primary to pretend like there's a process. And then the super PAC organizations choose who the candidate is going to be. The people, the voters, have no sway in that process whatsoever. Okay, I've talked about that stuff more than I had initially intended to, because I want to go into more detail on that tomorrow. Now here's me pouring some cold water on the Epstein situation. Guys, there are several reasons that the whole Jeffrey Epstein situation is extremely important. There are several reasons, not least of which is at a time when the conspiracy theories have changed. I did a whole show and covered this a few weeks ago and talked about this in more detail. But just let me throw you a little context and history to back this up a bit. In the past, until about the past 15, 20 years, we've had conspiracy theories, right? The Gulf of Tonkin incident. Discussing that was a conspiracy theory until it wasn't. Until the documentation was declassified, and now it's common knowledge that, yes, in fact, the whole Gulf of Tonkin incident was a false flag maneuver conducted intentionally by U.S. military and the U.S. government in order to create the public support for an entry into the war in Vietnam, right? The MK Ultra incident. Are you kidding me? We were training psychics to conduct intelligence operations? That's bullshit. That's insane. That can't... Oh. Declassified. No, turns out it totally happened. Right? The mud floods, right? The conspiracy theories... The conspiracy theories used to be wild and difficult to believe. Over the top. The Epstein Island conspiracy theory of a massive global network of organized pedophiles meeting in secret to conduct their horrific, disgusting acts on an island with a visible satanic temple. That's insane. That's impossible. Nobody could possibly believe. Oh, it's totally true. It's not that I've suddenly seen some evidence to show that it's true. It's that the whole world has seen it and now knows. No reasonable person now doubts the veracity of the Epstein pedophile ring, child sex trafficking, conspiracy theory. It's no longer a conspiracy theory. It is a conspiracy which has been identified and brought largely to light. And it's one that has come about at the same time that we're being faced with evidence that things like the COVID-19 pandemic, right? There's good evidence to believe that that was engineered and intentionally released. There's very good evidence to believe that the 2020 election was influenced by external factors and unjustly altered. There's very, very good evidence to believe that Joseph Robinette Biden has been engaged in extraordinary high-level corruption for half a century, climbing the ranks of political power, enriching his family through corrupt means, and is essentially a puppet of communist China. Right? The details of that comprise what should be correctly called a conspiracy theory. But the fact is that conspiracy theory, the phrase conspiracy theory, is used generally with the intent to convey some sort of derision, some sort of indictment of the possible verisimilitude of a claim, by suggesting that a person who believes that Joe Biden is corrupt, for example, is necessarily identical to a person who believes that Hillary Clinton is an alien lizard from another planet masquerading in a human suit. That a thing is a theory about a conspiracy is not the same as a thing being an illegitimate theory about an unprovable hypothesis. That a person believes that a conspiracy is in progress is in no way in and of itself an indictment of the credibility of that person or their reasonable mental faculties. Intelligent people now, and this is largely due to Epstein Epsteining himself, have woken up to the probability that, with the exception of the most extreme, like lizard people type conspiracy theories, many of the things which we've referred to for decades as conspiracy theories are in fact patterns which are now, for any reasonable and intelligent person, inignorable and are alarming to say the least. So, I'm 20 minutes in and I'm just now getting to the article about the Epstein list, but I think I've covered some important stuff so far this morning. Here's the article from The Guardian. Nearly 200 names linked to Jeffrey Epstein expected to be made public. I'm not going to show you the list this morning. I'm not going to talk about who's on the list this morning. I'm going to talk about the type of people that are on the list and the important distinction between what it means for one list to be released and not the other. But the article goes on to say nearly 200 names connected to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell sex trafficking conspiracy could be released by a New York judge as soon as Tuesday, exposing or confirming the identities of dozens of associates of the disgraced financier that until now have only been known as John and Jane Doe in court papers. A deadline for objections to the unsealing of the names passes at midnight on Monday, nearly 9 years after victim Virginia Giuffre filed a single defamation claim against Maxwell, daughter of the late British press baron Robert Maxwell, in 2015, that in turn produced the names in legal depositions. I bet you pennies to pesos Bill Clinton is going to be on this list, which is being released. So is Epstein's janitor. And, you'll probably see names on there that you recognize from the halls of Congress. May even be some Republicans on there. But they're trying to pull a piece of sleight of hand here. They are releasing a list of Epstein's associates. A list which, by the way, includes a few dozen of his victims. What we want, the thing that we're looking for, the thing that we've been demanding for the 9 years since Virginia Giuffre's defamation claim, the thing that we've insisted on is Epstein's client list. Now, one may suspect that Bill Clinton is going to end up on both of those lists. But without the client list, the associates list says that that Bill Clinton and Jeffrey Epstein were associated with one another because Epstein made donations to the Clinton Foundation. Epstein attended Clinton fundraisers. Epstein and Bill Clinton had perfectly legitimate above-board relationships, quite separate from the probable fact that Clinton was a client in Epstein's corrupt enterprise. That's the sleight of hand that they're pulling here. That's the cold water that I want to throw on you for this, right? Some of these comments here, Emily Suzanne said, these people aren't all going to be big names. Is anybody else skeptical like me? You should be skeptical because it's names linked to Epstein. It's not the client list, right? Not one child rapist on the Epstein client list has been arrested. Correct. It'll be a good start to the year when the pedo gets locked up. I can't quite tell who that is in that video. Bill Gates' ex-wife talks about his many visits to Epstein Island. Gates is going to be on that associates list, and it's going to be on there as a legitimate associate, someone who, they qualify as associates because Epstein donated money to the Bill Gates and Belinda Gates Foundation, right? And you're gonna find a lot of people who are probably on the client list are also on the associates list, because the client list we generally suspect is a list of very high power, high profile, and very wealthy individuals. Like let's clear something up right now. There ain't no broke bitches on Epstein's client list. Right? He didn't want no scrubs, as it were. Epstein didn't run the McDonald's of pedophilia. He ran the Cartier of pedophilia. You didn't even go in there with new money, let alone no money. Right? You got no money, you got new money, and then you got the real fucking problems. Well, it's those real problems that are going to be on that list. So that's the cold water that I wanted to throw on this is, we're going to get 200 names. A bunch of them are going to be your Bill Clintons, your Bill Gateses, right? Your Kevin Spaceys. And it's all going to be stuff like, oh, well, X made a donation to Y's charitable organization. A attended Y's charitable ball, political fundraiser. Epstein was probably at one of the $10,000 a plate Bill Clinton fundraiser dinners for his political campaign. Those are the kind of associations. Those are the kind of things that are going to get you on to the list of associates. That apparently, and being one of the victims. So while it's probably the case that some of the people on that list are clients, that they're on the list of associates is not necessarily in and of itself an indictment of their activities and their association with Epstein. But let me say this. We also know that many of these activities, especially activities that are publicly couched in the idea of being political contributions, charitable contributions, right? Y'all, everybody needs to get smart on how charities work. And it's not complicated. You have the large charitable organization, something like a Clinton Foundation. They get large donations from influential, valuable people. And they get large government grants. All in the name of some charitable pursuit. And then they pay high salaries to their executives, to their boards. They pay some incidental overhead fees, some facilities, some utilities, etc. And then when you see on their financial disclosure forms that they've done, okay, we put out 30% of the money that came in, we put out to charitable contributions, we put out to the work that we claim to do. What happens is, it's not that they go and do the work. It's not that they go and give the money to somebody. Instead, what they do, and give the money to the intended charitable recipient. Instead, what they do is that larger organization selects several smaller organizations that have the same target charitable recipient group in their mission statement, and they split up the remainder between those groups. So here, charitable organization A, B, C, and D, y'all get 25% of the 30% that's left over after we pay our board and we pay our overhead and we make all and we make all the money disappear so that we can continue to appear to be a non-profit, a not-for-profit charitable organization. And then those organizations lather, rinse, and repeat that process. They pay salaries out to the board and a few staffers, pay some overhead, and then, somewhere between 30 and 50% of what they receive from the Big Daddy organization comes down to them, and then they pick out 4 or 5 smaller charities down the chain, and they just spread it out that way. So almost none of the money that goes into the big charitable organizations ever actually makes it to the intended recipient. Do not give your money to charities. If you want to do good work with your money, identify small local charities where you can go and engage and do the work with them. And then, if you see them doing the work that you want to see done with your money, having done the work with them, then you will have vetted an organization that deserves to have some of your money put into it. Maybe. But the vast majority of the whole charitable contributions activity is an absolute scam. It's a money laundering machine. At the highest levels of it, it's purely money laundering. It's what Democrats do. It's why they're so opposed to tax exemptions for churches, right? Churches tend to do a lot of the work that charitable organizations purport to do. They do it locally, they do it by direct contribution, and they do it with the voluntary cooperative involvement of the parishioner. And for that reason, they absolutely qualify as nonprofit organizations. And that's why so many Democrats try so hard to eliminate the nonprofit status, the church tax exemptions, because Democrats despise competition. They're communists, right? Competition is a feature of markets, of free markets. Adam Smith's invisible hand, as I was talking with the kids about yesterday. Competition is an important part of that activity. It's why sports are important. It's why we engage one another competitively, combatively, and we can do that in such a way that is social and friendly, and it's why strong men appear to be combative and dangerous on occasion, because part of what makes things strong, especially humans and especially men, is growing through competitive activity. Stryker says churches could do it as a 1099 instead of 501c3 and evade LBJ's free speech regs. I'd have to think about that, about the ins and outs of that a little more, but that's not a bad play, because the fact is the free speech curtailment of churches. Well, this is a whole rabbit hole that I'm not really prepared to go down. But let me just say, as a church, as a religious organization, in order to maintain your tax exempt status, you're supposed to not advocate for political positions from the pulpit. That's supposed to be verboten. But of course, there are certain churches. Yeah, there are certain churches that are more than happy to get up behind the pulpit and shout very explicit, not just political positions, not just express political wants and expectations, but to explicitly instruct their parishioners to take specific actions up to and including giving them their marching orders on for whom to vote. Right? I don't think I have to remind anybody of the man who shouted, "God damn America!" Really? Yeah, let me clarify something for you real quick, guys. The pants-shitting, sociopathic Alzheimer's patient that currently inhabits the Oval Diaper is the direct disciple of the direct disciple of Jeremiah Wright. The people who are going to vote for Joe Biden in November this year voted for goddamn America. That's the thing that they voted for. And they're going to keep voting for it. And that's where we are. So, all that said, here's the bright light. It is a new year. It is an election year. And I think perhaps the most positive thing that we can say going into this election year is that looking back on 2020 and 2022 and the obvious cheating and rigging and social media manipulation that occurred to steal that election, to steal those elections, at least we can hope that some of our conservative politicians and conservative lawmakers have learned from the examples of the past. That's a lot to hope for. We're talking about government, talking about public servants. We're talking about government officials. We're not talking about the best and the brightest. Right? Never, ever, ever forget this. Government is the employer of last resort. Now, that's a gross generalization. I was a government employee because I got bored building paper mills and thought it would be fun to go kill some Arabs. Now, the military is a little bit different thing. But let's be fair. For a lot of young men, even military service is employment of last resort. Right? There's a few of us that went in with certain expectations and honestly enjoyed what we did. But generalities are true for a reason. And one of those reasons is this. Government is an employer of last resort. You cannot pin too much hope on the expectation of anyone who is funded largely by government contribution that they will proceed with competence, efficiency, and least of all, the interest of their constituents at the center of their decision making. Don't forget that. That may be the best reason I can think of to restrict the size, scope, and power of government generally. And so, since the brightest thing, the best thing, the most optimistic thing that I can hope for going into this election year is that our conservative politicians have learned the lessons of the past from the kerfuffle and debacle that was 2020 and 2022, and hope that somebody sprouts a fucking brainstem and a nutsack and fires Ronald McDaniel. That is a thin hope, because it is unreasonable to expect and to hope to them for their competence, efficiency, and respect of your interests. And so you must engage them. This is a start, right? Doing a show. I've got several dozen of you watching right now. Waller says Vivek for GOP chair. I'd actually be pretty okay with that. I have some concerns about Vivek, but generally I like him. But yeah, doing a vlog, a show, something like this, that's one thing. I'm talking to a few dozen people right now, and that's not nothing. It's not a lot, but it's not nothing. But you can call your congressman, you can call your senator, you can go knock on the doors, you can go talk to the governor, go up to the Capitol and have a conversation. Right? I've met with Governor Kemp and several of the others in the state of Georgia on many occasions. That's something that you need to give your time to. Go to your local meetings, right? Go tell Oz Nesbitt he's fucking it up in Rockdale County, right? Go tell Sherry Washington that, hey, we're tired of having drinking water in this county that's 90% reprocessed sewage because you won't get your shit together and fix the silt problem up in the Big Haynes River, up in the Big Haynes Creek reservoir. Go tell them that. Go tell them what's going on. Go tell them you know about what's going on. In a lot of these cases, right, you talk about corrupt assholes like Oz Nesbitt. It's not that he doesn't know that he's fucking up. It's that he thinks you don't know it, and that for that reason he can get away with it. Go tell him he's wrong. Go tell him you know. All right. I'm going to go ahead and put a pin in it there. I gotta head out to Stockbridge and go to a house I've never been to and shoot it. With a camera. Y'all be safe out there. Thanks for watching this morning, guys. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. We love you, and we'll see you tomorrow.